Las Vegas just wrapped up rookie minicamp, and I'm going to be straight with you. Most of the coverage you've seen probably missed what actually mattered. 3 days, no pads, shorts and helmets in a controlled environment. On the surface, that sounds like the kind of event where nothing real gets decided, where the football is too sanitized to reveal anything meaningful. I used to lean toward that skeptical take myself. I don't anymore. Here's what changed my mind. 3 days of walkthrough football tells you almost nothing about athleticism, but it tells you everything about character. Who walks in with professional intention already baked into their DNA? Who lingers on the field when the session is technically over? Who is already mentally operating like someone building a 10-year career versus someone still adjusting to the shock of being in the building at all? That information is real. It matters. And what came out of Las Vegas last week, when you pull together the sourced conversations and the observable patterns that filtered through, paints a picture worth examining carefully. Because training camp is coming, and once the full roster takes over the story, these early signals get buried under volume. Let me start with Nicholas Henning, because his minicamp story captures something specific about how this front office is currently thinking. Henning walked into that facility with no contract, no guaranteed money waiting, no relationship history inside the building to lean on if he had a rough afternoon. Just a 3-day window, completely raw, in front of a coaching staff making a live decision about whether he was worth an investment. I want you to sit with how unforgiving that situation actually is. When a veteran struggles through a bad practice, there are years of context buffering the moment. When you walk in off the street with nothing to your name inside an organization, a rough day is potentially the entire story. Henning didn't have a rough day. Across 3 days, he did enough to earn a contract from the Las Vegas Raiders, and in an environment where the vast majority of tryout invitations end with a handshake and a flight home, that outcome is its own form of argument. The football background makes it more compelling. Henning came into the game as a tight end and H-back before transitioning to offensive tackle, and that origin story carries weight. Players who arrive at the offensive line position from receiving and blocking hybrid roles tend to carry a quality of spatial awareness and movement fluency that linemen who've only ever played in the trenches often develop more slowly, if ever. He was the second overall selection in the CFL draft, and the Raiders moved before he played a professional snap for Toronto. That's a front office saying, we're not going to wait for someone else to develop this asset for us. We're going to bring him in and do it ourselves. At 6'6" with the frame and athletic markers to operate across multiple line positions, Henning is not walking into week 1 of the regular season as a starter. That's not the point. The point is an organization building offensive line depth around a first overall quarterback pick and the kind of raw, athletically gifted developmental prospect who enters the right coaching environment and gradually becomes something real. Henning earned his shot. He's on this list. Now, I want to spend real time on Trey Zoom because the most important thing he did during minicamp didn't happen at practice. It happened in a hotel room. Fernando Mendoza, first overall pick, the most important person in this entire franchise, identified early in the minicamp process that he had a mechanical problem demanding serious attention. The man ran the shotgun on something close to 95% of his college snaps. Kubiak's system isn't built that way. It leans meaningfully on under-center operation, particularly within the play-action and bootleg concepts that create the pocket environments most favorable for a developing quarterback still calibrating to the professional game. The adaptation required is genuinely technical, and the official minicamp schedule wasn't generating the volume of repetitions Mendoza wanted to build the comfort level he needed at the pace he wanted to build it. So he created his own volume. 25 to 50 additional center quarterback exchange reps per night in the hotel on his own time. No cameras, no coaches, nobody required to be there or even aware it was happening. And the player showing up every single night to do those reps with him, Trey Zoom. I need you to understand what that choice actually represents, because it's easy to hear it as a team chemistry story and walk away from the real competitive intelligence embedded in the decision. A rookie offensive lineman who makes himself available to the franchise quarterback in unscheduled hours when the coaching staff isn't watching and there's no formal record of participation and no direct competitive advantage for showing up is building something most veterans never fully construct with a quarterback. He's becoming the person Mendoza associates with the mechanical work that matters most right now. That's not a small thing. That's the foundation of an on-field relationship that functions differently than any other connection in an offense when games have real consequences and margin for error shrinks. When the quarterback is processing under pressure and needs to trust the person at the center of the operation, that trust traces back somewhere. For Mendoza, some of that trust is going to trace back to a hotel hallway in Las Vegas and a player who kept showing up when nobody asked him to. Layer onto that the reporting from official sessions, Zoom demonstrating genuine flexibility across center, guard, and tackle. And you have a third-round pick who arrived at minicamp as a depth option and left it as a real candidate for early playing time. The coaching staff is already describing him as a sixth lineman option with the range to cover multiple positions in emergencies. That specific kind of value doesn't expire when the roster gets complicated. Haye is the running back story I care about most personally coming out of this camp, and I want to be upfront about my position on him because I think it matters. I was publicly advocating for this player before the draft. Not a first-day pick, not a second-day pick. A player who went undrafted out of Maryland and signed with the Raiders for nothing after the selection process ended. When you go on record about a player like that before he's drafted by anyone, you're putting something on the line. What came back from sources after minicamp was exactly what I believed was there, and I'm not going to pretend I wasn't relieved to hear it. He was described as meaningfully more physical than coaches and players anticipated. Not slightly more, meaningfully more. And the physical quality generating the most conversation wasn't what he does in open space. It was what he does in protection. He was in the right position before plays developed. He was communicating his protection assignments within the scheme, rather than waiting to be corrected after a breakdown. He was processing blitz pickup responsibilities with a clarity that typically takes rookies most of training camp just to approach. In Kubiak's system, that matters in a way that goes beyond box score contribution. The run game and play action are operating in concert throughout this offense, and the running back's role in protection directly shapes what the quarterback can do within the pocket. A back who can be trusted on third down in passing situations, who can stay on the field when the defense is bringing pressure without the quarterback mentally flinching at the assignment about to unfold behind him, occupies a specific and genuinely valuable function that pure speed and explosion can't replicate. Haye isn't going to outrun Ashton Jeanty down the sideline. He isn't going to match Mike Washington's burst in the open field. What he offers is the most reliable protection profile of any back currently on this roster, and inside a system that places real assignment responsibility on the position in the passing game, that reliability creates opportunities that athleticism alone cannot produce. He belongs here. Malik Benson is the name that surprised me most coming out of this minicamp, and I'm going to own that surprise rather than reframe it. 6th round, pick 195 out of Oregon. That's the kind of selection that gets logged on draft weekend and doesn't resurface until final roster cuts force the question about who stays and who goes. Then multiple independent sources came back from Las Vegas with the same information, separately, without coordinating their reporting. And that convergence is the closest thing to signal reliability this environment can generate. Mendoza's attention during walkthroughs kept gravitating toward Benson. He was among the first players on the field each session. His hands showed up as naturally reliable in a way that suggests real skill rather than the product of a controlled setting without contested catches. And his straight line speed was the kind where people watching kept waiting for a defender to close the gap, and the gap simply never closed. When you pair that specific kind of speed with a quarterback who possesses genuine accuracy to attack tight windows under pressure, the yards after contact opportunities become a defensive problem rather than a situational variable. I've seen minicamp receivers vanish by the time preseason hits. I've learned not to overreact to early reports that don't survive real competition. I'm trying to stay measured here, but the specificity and consistency of what came back on Benson demands attention. I'm paying it. Fernando Mendoza's complete minicamp picture needs to be understood as a unified whole, rather than a collection of individual moments, because the pieces illuminate each other in ways that disappear when you examine them in isolation. Yes, the arm talent is real. A source I trust used the image of a pitcher at the top of his delivery, the ball emerging with carry and natural velocity that mechanical work alone cannot produce. The accuracy is there too. The combination of those two qualities at the first overall level is validation of evaluation, not surprise. That's confirmation that the people who made this pick saw what they thought they saw, expected. What is not expected, what genuinely matters, is everything built around the throwing. The hotel room reps nobody required. The decision to decline a White House visit because he felt the facility was where he needed to be during that specific window of the offseason. The way he describes his own position within the organization, openly placing himself at the bottom of the hierarchy, despite being the single most valuable asset the franchise has committed to for the next decade. I've heard that kind of humility performed before. I've seen players in press conferences deliver exactly the right words and then disappear when the cameras leave. The hotel room is not a performance. The voluntary snaps with Zoom at midnight are not a performance. You cannot sustain fake humility through behavioral choices that carry zero public visibility. The gap between where Mendoza structurally sits in this organization and how he's actually spending his time in Las Vegas is the most revealing information available about who this person is. The one note floating back from inside the building is that his vocal leadership is still developing, which is exactly what you'd expect from a 22-year-old building command of a completely new professional system. The loudest voice in a quarterback room needs the deepest material command underneath it. As the system becomes his own, the voice will follow. The foundation is being laid correctly. On the defensive side, let me take you through Locky Tossy first, because his minicamp story is really about an organization correcting an institutional error before it fully metastasized. Last season, the previous coaching staff experimented with converting Tossy, 375 pounds of defensive tackle, into an offensive lineman. The roster desperation driving that experiment was understandable in context. The football reasoning behind it was extremely difficult to defend. The technical and cognitive demands of the offensive line position, scheme recognition at the point of attack, assignment communication under pressure, pass protection footwork against edge rushers with developed counter-move libraries, represent a steeper learning curve than anything the nose tackle position requires at Tossy's size and profile. At nose tackle, the assignment is structurally cleaner. Hold your ground against double teams, occupy space, disrupt the defensive picture for every linebacker in your vicinity. That's a realistic developmental path for a player still building professional football literacy. The Raiders have returned him to that path. That decision itself is the improvement. Tossy is being deployed correctly now. Sometimes the most significant outcome a coaching staff change produces is the removal of obvious misalignments that compounded under the previous regime. This is one of those cases. Devin Perkins earned a contract after minicamp, and the pattern of multiple tryout players leaving Las Vegas with signed deals tells you something specific about the evaluative standard this coaching staff applied coming in. They knew what they needed at the bottom of the depth chart and moved with conviction when players demonstrated they could fill it. The description I received on Perkins was not marginal encouragement. He was described as athletically noticeable in a way that made people watching look twice. I pulled his testing numbers after hearing that characterization, and the data validated the reaction. His relative athletic score landed in the 83rd percentile among strong safeties in the formal evaluation database. That's not an athlete who fell through the scouting process because his tools were questioned. That's an exceptional mover who fell through for reasons unrelated to physical ceiling. The Raiders found him, evaluated him in a live setting, and signed him before he left the building. The special teams value he demonstrated at Utah State gives him an immediate contribution path, while the full picture of his positional capability develops at the professional level. None of this is mysterious when you understand the profile completely. Keon Sloan showed up at exactly the right moment on the edge rusher depth chart. Crawford missed a day for workload management. Snowden was released before camp opened. Wilson was moved in a trade. The room had genuine openings, and Sloan, undrafted out of NC State, walked into that environment and generated enough specific conversation among coaches to make reporting on him feel warranted. The qualities that came back were motor, work ethic, and one detail I found more meaningful than the others: his ability to ask the right questions. That might register as a minor observation in isolation. Inside a complex defensive system, it's not minor at all. The player who accurately identifies the edge of his own understanding and actively seeks correct information is already operating ahead of players who quietly mask confusion and fall further behind without anyone noticing. Sloan is showing functional versatility within the defensive alignment and carries special teams capability that may ultimately be the deciding factor when final roster decisions carry real stakes. The room has space. He's competing for some of it. Trey Stokes is where I want to finish, because the more I understand about what this coaching staff envisions for him, the more I think he represents something genuinely different for where this defense is heading over the next several years. The internal conversation isn't about Stokes as a coverage safety running with slot receivers. It's about him as the defensive quarterback, the pre-snap communicator, the player whose assignment is to read the entire picture before the ball moves and get 11 defenders positioned correctly before coverage can fracture. That is an enormous professional responsibility to place on a rookie. The fact that the coaching staff is treating that vision as realistic rather than aspirational tells you precisely how high their evaluation of his football intelligence actually sits. The athletic foundation underneath that confidence is easy to understand once you look at the numbers. He walked on at Arizona, a label that carries immediate assumptions about physical ceiling, and those assumptions are simply incorrect. His speed testing placed in the 99th percentile, His overall athletic evaluation ranks among the 15 most exceptional in the position's formal evaluation history. He is genuinely elite physically, operating under a descriptive label that most observers use as an excuse not to look more closely. Add to that physical profile the detail that Stokes watches film voluntarily at home, not because a coach put it on the schedule or a team policy created an expectation, but because the intellectual problem of football is something he's genuinely drawn to when nobody is watching or keeping score. That quality, paired with elite athleticism and a coaching staff willing to trust him with the full defensive communication responsibility as a rookie, is the foundation of something that has a chance to be special over a long career. The pairing being developed between Stokes and Dalton Johnson creates a secondary combination whose personalities actively sharpen each other. Johnson's intensity generates the competitive energy that pulls Stokes toward the vocal leadership role the system needs him to grow into. Stokes' measured intelligence gives Johnson's intensity a structural anchor it needs to be sustainable rather than chaotic. That pairing has the characteristics of a defensive backfield partnership that opposing offenses will have to actively scheme around for multiple seasons. 3 days of no-contact football in the Nevada desert. And what those 3 days produced, when you stop looking at individual moments and start reading the complete picture, is real evidence of an organization constructing something with genuine structural coherence from the inside out. The work ethic is being set from the top by a first overall pick taking voluntary reps in a hotel room after practice ends. The character is showing up across the roster in the specific ways it only shows in unstructured moments when nobody is formally watching. This foundation is more visible than it's been in Las Vegas in a long time. Training camp will complicate the story, deepen it, and force harder questions. But what minicamp answered was already more than enough to feel real about where this thing is going.